Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TimeformUS Forecast of September 9th. And today, I'm Craig Mulkowski. Today, I'm being joined by track announcer Larry Collmus from Kentucky Downs. We're going to handicap the late pick five and all stakes pick five from Kentucky Downs, where Larry is the announcer, as well as being the voice of the Triple Crown, the Breeders' Cup. So I'm sure most people don't need an introduction to Larry. What some people may not know is Larry and I actually go back a long, long ways. He's a good friend of mine. I'm very happy to have him on here. Very excited for this. We actually went to high school together, and Larry is actually responsible for getting me into horse racing. He finally browbeat me into going to Bowie one day. They used to ask me all the time, him and a friend of ours named Ken Beck, who I'm sure will listen to this podcast as well. And once I went, I was hooked. We've taken a little bit different career paths. Larry, obviously, the announcer, me, more speed figures, handicapping, things like that. But Larry's gotten into the handicapping part as well, as he does some work for FanDuel, formerly TVG. So without further ado, let me introduce Larry. And I'll start with Larry. What is going on with you these days?
Oh, well, it's good to be on with you first of all, since we've known each other for 40 years now, I guess, something around that part. But yeah, I mean, I'm here at Kentucky Downs. We're halfway through the meet and getting ready to have our biggest day Saturday, and it's going to be a lot of fun with all the $1 million races going on, and hopefully the weather is going to be okay. We've got our fingers crossed on that. But besides Kentucky Downs, I'm enjoying my new gig with FanDuel TV. They're sending me all over the country after Kentucky Downs. I'll be at Presque Isle for the Masters there, the Pennsylvania Derby. Then I'm going to go to Santa Anita for a little bit, and Keeneland, and just getting busy, getting ready for the Breeders' Cup. So it's good to be busy, and looking forward to a fun rest of the year, and culminating with the Breeders' Cup, of course.
Racking up those frequent flyer miles, I imagine.
Definitely.
One thing I really am not familiar with, I currently don't have TVG or FanDuel, I should say, as they don't take Oklahoma customers. I write them every now and then to bug them, so hopefully that'll happen someday. So I'm not really familiar with how you handicap. It's been a long time since we've actually went to racetracks together and bet. And just curious, what kind of tools do you use and what kind of player are you? Like, for example, we're talking the pick five, but I often say I don't play a lot of pick fives. I'm more of a vertical player, one race at a time kind of guy. I think that suits me better. But yeah, what are the things you look for in a race, the tools you use, and some of your favorite bets?
Well, working for FanDuel TV and TVG before that, they had us put together a lot of those pick four and pick five tickets, and they are hard to hit sometimes for sure. So that is one of the things that I've been doing quite a bit for them. But as far as I'm a DRF guy, definitely a Formulator guy. I've grown to really love all of the things that they offer, and Thorograph as well. So I usually combine the two. Then of course you look at replays, and look at trips and those type of things. So I don't think there's one thing that stands out as far as what I look for in trying to pick a winner of a race. Maybe if there's anything, it's a speed figure situation that helps. I think technically, I think that what I'll do is I'll look at Thorograph a little bit for sure, and try to find out who's faster than who. As far as if I'm having some trouble, I think with just trying to separate horses, I think that's a big help for sure.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I think sometimes speed figures get a bad rap because some people try to just assume that's the whole race and bet off of numbers. And a speed figure guy like myself learned pretty darn quick that you're not going to win just playing the fastest speed figures and things like that. So I'm similar to you. I'm a trip guy. I like to look at patterns, which I imagine I don't use Thorograph, but I know that's a big thing with them. Looking for horses who are improving or maybe topped out and are going to regress, things like that. So definitely, I think speed figures are important. Obviously, it's what I do for a living, but they're certainly not the be all and end all of horse racing.
Well, I think they're definitely very important, especially I think when you're talking about a circuit that you're not following. They're like a huge help if like you're asked to handicap some circuit that you haven't really been paying attention to on a regular basis. I think that's a huge help with speed figures as far as separating those horses. But if you're handicapping a track like me at Monmouth, where you get to know the horses, especially the Jersey breds who tend to run against each other. Hey, you don't even need speed figures sometimes with those. You kind of know who's better than who, and you go by the trips that they've had, and whether they can put good races back to back or whether they can't. And I think they're so it varies as far as the value of them.
Right, and that's the point, value, because speed figures have obviously evolved. When they first started, I remember going to Garden State Park in the early 80s, and I'm not, or mid 80s, and I'm not saying that was the advent of speed figures. Obviously, they've been around a lot longer than that, but they weren't publicly available. And you could win betting just the best figures a lot of times, get some big prices. But those days are gone with buyers being in the DRF. They started in the racing times. Everybody has decent speed figures now for the most part. So I think you
And
hit
of,
on.
and of course, Garden State, as you mentioned, back in the especially the first couple of years there, back in the middle '80s, we both knew that the most important thing to have was the trip, which
Yes.
was to be parked outside and not be able to save any ground. If you were on the rail, you were dead meat. So
Yep.
that was we made a lot of money those days betting on those races.
Yes, and you still had to be up pretty close if memory serves. Like the 2-3 wide trip was ideal if you were only a length or two off the pace.
Right, you weren't coming from way behind, and it was easier to handicap sprint races because you knew the jockey wouldn't even have the opportunity to get to the rail. So,
Right.
even if they didn't know the bias, we did.
Yeah, my favorite guy was Rick Wilson. He was a guy who definitely knew the bias. He would even steer out there if he needed to. So you could usually count on him to do the right thing with the horse.
There you go.
All right. Well, I don't want to bore people too much reminiscing. We could go on for hours if we told some of our high school stories, but I'm not sure people would think as highly of us as they do now if they heard some of them. So we will move on to Kentucky Downs. And the one thing I wanted to ask before the handicapping is watching these races on TV. It's a challenge for us fans out there that are used to watching just regular ovals, don't watch a lot of overseas racing. What are some of the challenges of calling the races at Kentucky Downs? It can't be like calling a race at Monmouth Park or Saratoga or even Belmont Park, which is huge, but just still not the same.
It's completely different than any other place I've ever called, and there's so many things about it that are hard. And I'm going to guess after Saturday's card, when we're having 12 races, with 10 of them having 12 horses and 2 of them having 10 horses, by the end of the day, they're going to haul me out of there. I'm going to be so exhausted. But, there's so many different intricacies about this place. I think the two hardest things for me are when they go to the 6 furlong pole, which is at the very top in the middle of the backstretch there, and they're going uphill to the 6 furlongs, and then they make a loop and they go downhill. And when you're announcing a race, you're using the jockey silks as your guide, and pretty much for part of that, I'm looking at white pants. The silks are going away from me and hard to see, and I'm just looking at the backs of the horses and the jockeys. And during that point, if you hear me saying they pass the 6 furlongs and head toward the 5.5 and to the top of the hill, and or whatever I'm going to say, I'm killing time, because I really can't judge. It looks like the inside horse is maybe a length or two in front, and he's really like eighth. Well, you've just no idea what's going on until they separate themselves. You have to sort of go by what you saw before they got to that area and hope it didn't change much. And the same thing goes for the top of the stretch. The stretch run of Kentucky Downs is 5/16 of a mile. The track itself is a mile and 5/16. But when they turn for home, they still have over a quarter of a mile to run, and you are looking at an absolute low head-on shot from where I am. I really have no depth perception at all when they come to the top of the stretch. It's a guessing game. I'm going by where they were when they turned for home, what the jockeys are doing. If it looks like somebody's still in hand, I want to focus on that horse. It's really hard. And then when they get to the eighth pole, they actually make a little dog leg. It's not completely straight, and then you can tell exactly what's going on. And then if there's like five across the track at the finish, you're so low that you have to wait to the wire to really see what happened. And the good news is, like Saratoga, Kentucky Downs is a great place to call close photo finishes, because you have an angle that is right at the finish line and you're low. And so you really do have a good perspective at the wire. But outside of that, you don't have a good perspective pretty much anywhere on that racetrack.
Well, I know one thing I've appreciated is it's always kind of that when you're watching on TV, it looks like they're coming to the wire the way we're used to watching races, and then we get this cut in the video, and all of a sudden it's probably around where that dog leg is, I would guess. And then you get a different perspective. But I've learned to listen to you because you kind of let us know when the wire is coming up. That used to fool me quite a bit, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the one thing, if you're there in person, you know how much running they have left to do. But if you're not, it is a little bit difficult. I've suggested to management that if there's ever a place that could use a drone, I think it would be perfect for Kentucky Downs, and add to that shot as a great perspective of actually how things look, because it is hard to display on TV. And one of the problems too, I think you'll see next year, hopefully, that we'll have some better camera shots. And one of the reasons why we don't is the construction of the hotel, which is going to be being built there right now. It'll be ready for next year. But because of all that construction, there's really no way to put a camera in that position in the middle of the stretch. And I think that that's the plan, that they want to put another tower in there to get some better views of the track. So we'll see what happens next year, but hopefully there'll be some improvements to that.
All right, I've stalled long enough. We're going to have to dive into handicapping, which is always just for this track such a mental exercise. I think it's so different. The fields are huge. We're going to start with the Grade 3 Kentucky Downs Ladies Turf for a mere $750,000. And we drew a pretty good field here. We got the top two finishers from the Beverly D, a Grade 1. I had an advantage in that I've already done some preview videos for this race with David Aragona for this and one other on the card. So I'll start with you. Obviously, Delica is the 2-1 morning line favorite. She won that race. Looks like she has a pace edge. I'm not sure how much that will apply in a race like this. Well, how did you see this race shaking out?
Well, I think that the 1-2 finishers in the Beverly D are the ones to beat. I'm actually going to pick Princess Grace to beat her. I think that Princess Grace, obviously, we know one thing for sure, that she loves this turf course, and she won this race last year over Delica with not so good of a trip. She normally, shows a little bit of speed. That day she got left at the start and still managed to run down and beat Delica in that race. I think that she teams up so well with Florent Giroux. They seem to have a great relationship. They run great every time together, and I think she could definitely turn the tables on Delica. One thing I will say is post position really doesn't make much difference. I don't think in Kentucky Downs, especially in a mile, they just, the course is so wide, and we'll have the rails all the way down on Saturday. So I mean, I don't think any inside post is going to be an advantage to Delica. The one advantage, like you said, might be the fact that she could be the inside speed of the race, and speed is, it's been holding pretty good on this turf course. I haven't seen a whole lot of horses come from way behind. Speed seems like it's been holding, so that's somewhat of an advantage for Delica. But I think Princess Grace is going to be able to beat her again, and that's going to be my pick for sure in here. I just didn't think any of the others were in their league. Maybe Lady Spite Spear, she's in really good form up at Woodbine, and I just don't. I think she's a cut below those horses. So that's the way I saw it.
I'm with you on Princess Grace. I think she is the horse to beat. That was a little, I won't say it was a beat. I did a preview video for that Beverly D, and I actually picked the top two the way they finished, just in reverse order. And they were the two longest shots in the field, but it would have been a lot better for me had Princess Grace held on. Turned out she actually made the lead, couldn't quite do it. I think the track at Churchill had something to do with that, that both of the turf races that they were pretty much just parades, not much changing of position, and I think the Lika had the advantage. But I harken back to what you said. She beat her on this course last year, and I am a big horse for course guy at Kentucky Downs, with it just being so unique compared to other courses. I do think that carries some weight. So I would say she is the horse to beat. I went in a slightly different direction. I picked her second. The horse that and it's just because of value. If I do play a pick five, she will certainly be prominent on my tickets, Princess Trace. But the horse I will probably make a win play on is the 3-horse Hendy Woods. She looks a little bit light on speed figures, but she is in pretty good form. She dead heated for the win at Indiana last time out, with another horse, Flippant, who is also in this field. But she's another one that I hearken back to her Kentucky Downs race last year when she was in the One Dreamer Stakes. Not only did she run her best speed figure on Timeform US that day at 118, she destroyed that field. She won by over 4 lengths, and it just seemed like she really had an affinity for the course. So she's the other one I would use if I do play a pick five in here, but I'm going to use her in vertical bets along with Princess Grace. As I mentioned, I will post a link to the video on Twitter for the rundown that David and I did on this one. But just a really good race to start off the sequence, I think. Probably more than a grade three, but I think it's going to take some time for these purses and the gradings to catch up with each other.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, because Dalika is a grade one winner, the purse of this race is actually going to be $1 million. They've raised the purse. 750 wasn't quite enough, I guess. So we're up to 1 million. The purses at this place are absolutely unbelievable. The maiden special weights for 150,000, and then we go up from there. It's very rare to have a purse under $150,000 at this meet. We only have a couple of races that are. So the one thing about Handy Woods, the other good thing is that I think Julian Leparoux is a guy that rides this turf course really well too. He knows it, as well as anybody else. So my question with her was she fast enough? I just thought she might just be a little bit of cut below those horses, but the price is going to be decent on her for sure.
I like that you mentioned Julian Leparoux because I thought he had a really good Saratoga meet as well, kind of underrated with the big name guys there, but he did more than hold his own with the mounts he had, so he is riding in good form.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his for sure, and he gets a lot of grief sometimes on Twitter and things, but I think he's an excellent rider. And you know what the other thing that and someone like yelled at me when I was doing Gulfstream for TVG. When I said that he's a really good front end rider, and they're like, "Oh, that's not true," but it is true. He is really good at rating horses on the lead, and I think that that's one of his things that he does best.
Yeah, I have no argument with that. He's a guy who doesn't ride. I think because of the conceptions about his riding, he doesn't get a lot of front runners to ride, but I have seen him steal plenty of races. It's funny you mentioned about him getting grief. Though I would say the two colonies that get the most grief on social media and from fans would be jockeys and racetrack announcers. So I'm sure you
Yeah,
can deal with, you can understand how that works sometimes.
absolutely, for sure, and you take the good with the bad. Surprisingly, my Twitter reactions that I get are for the most part good, and I know they can be pretty fierce at times. But the one good thing that I've discovered with Twitter is the ability to mute, and sometimes I'll put that to use.
Yes, no doubt about it. I try not to use it too much, and I think you're great on Twitter. By the way, I don't say that just because we're friends. You do well. You're interactive with the fans. You always respond when people ask you questions, even sometimes negatively. So I think if you do that, people are going to respect you and kind of understand we're all people out there. And obviously, a guy with your presence is going to get a lot of good and bad come with it. So
For sure.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, luckily you don't give them much bad, in my opinion. So
No, I try to be pretty positive on Twitter, but every once in a while I can be a little sarcastic.
you no. All right, let's move on to the Grade 2 FanDuel Turf Sprint Stakes. This one is also $1 million, assuming there haven't been any upgrades.
No, I don't
But
think so.
this is one I would imagine will become a Grade 1 pretty soon. Drew a really strong field in here once again. Most of the best sprinters, turf sprinters that we would see. Have shown up, and I would imagine they're going to be led by Arrest Me Red, who is from the Wesley Ward barn, someone who almost always has a big presence in these races. He certainly isn't passing up a lot of races at Kentucky Downs, rightfully so with the purses. What did you think of his chances in here, and who do you think his main competition is?
Well, I think he's definitely the one to beat, no question in here. Arrest Me Red is in absolutely terrific form for Wesley Ward, and he gets Irad Ortiz. I'm going to try to beat him, though. I think I've got a little bit of an interesting play in here at 15 to 1 on the morning line. The 9 horse Front Run the Fed, uh, who last year ran in this race, not last year, 2 years ago, ran in this race and got beat a neck over a soft turf course. I think we're going to get some rain, and I think that that's going to benefit Front Run the Fed. He also ran pretty well in the turf sprint here last year. He only got beat 3 lengths at 48 to 1. I think the race is going to set up really well for him with his running style, and I think one of the most underrated turf jockeys around is Jose Lezcano. I think he's really good on the turf. We don't get to see him too much here at Kentucky Downs, but he's an excellent rider, and this horse is making a third start off the layoff. Seems to be going the right way, speed figure wise, and I just think there's a lot of good things going, especially the price for Front Run the Fed. So I'm gonna try to go for a little bit of a bomb in there and hope we can get a nice price.
Okay, I'm going to promise people that Larry and I did not talk about these races at all
Uh
before we
oh,
went on air here.
we did
And
not.
I landed on the same exact long shot as you did. So I don't
Wow,
know if that's good or bad.
probably
Uh,
bad.
but but you never know. David and I have a pretty good history of picking some price horses, so I'm not going to be too afraid just because you picked one as well. And I saw a lot of the same things you did. This is a horse who likes the course. I do think there's going to be some give in it as you do. And I actually really liked his 4-star Dave. He ran into Casa Creed there, who is definitely a grade 1 horse. He won the Japer, won the 4-star Dave, and is one of the better turf horses out there. And I thought he made a little bit of a premature move into a hot pace that day. And in addition to that, that was a mile race, obviously. He's turning back to 6 furlongs. And I should mention these races at Kentucky Downs are definitely about a half furlong longer than the listed distance because they just have really long run ups. And if you
Yeah.
throw in the undulations and the turns of the course, it might even be a little longer than that. So this 6 furlong race probably plays like about 6.7 furlongs if you're really into it.
We this is like a rarity at Kentucky Downs because we normally have 6.5. We don't run too many 6 furlong races, and like I think I saw your tweet earlier about 6.5 really being 7, and so 6 is probably closer to 6.5. And the other thing, Craig, that I wanted to bring up too was the fact that a lot of times the cutback horses coming from a mile have an advantage, kind of like the downhill races at Santa Anita. I like those mile horses cutting back to 6.5. I think the same thing goes for Kentucky Downs. I think it matters to have a horse that can get that added distance, and I think that is a thing that people should be looking for in these turf sprints at Kentucky Downs. Horses cutting back from a mile.
And that's exactly where I was going with this is these kind of horses normally a turf sprint, they're cutting back to 5, 5.5, maybe 6. But in this case, it's more of a traditional cutback like we see on dirt from a mile or mile and a 16th to 7 furlongs. And I just think this race really fits him. And he's a price horse that I'm going to use. As you said, he's had some success here. I will certainly be using Arrest Me Red. I did a formulator stat on one of our previews about Wesley Ward. And when he sends out favorites in these races, which Arrest Me Red is almost assuredly going to be favored, he wins at I think it's a 42% clip with a $2.35 return per $2 bet. So he doesn't just send out horses who aren't well meant. That said, this one I don't like as much as the one I did the formulator stat that we're going to talk about in the next couple races away. So I will spread a little bit in this one. Front Run the Fed was one, and he's a horse I will definitely play in verticals. He would be my top pick as well. I also like Totally Boss a little bit in here. He's a horse who has won over this course before. I think it was when he was a 3-year-old. Ran a big figure in one of the races, the Run Happy Turf Sprint, I guess it was. So maybe it was this same one. I don't remember. So maybe he wasn't a 3-year-old, but whatever. My memory's not that good. He ran big. He's had a couple long layoffs in his career, but I liked it back in May at Churchill. He came back from a long layoff. He got a great pace set up that day, but he was able to beat a pretty decent allowance field. And those allowance fields at Churchill Downs were no joke. They had purses very similar to what we're seeing at Kentucky Downs, almost like small stakes races. I think maybe I'm not a big bounce guy, but if ever a horse was going to bounce, it's one that's coming off a year layoff and runs a big effort. And that also that course at Ellis Park was just really tough to make up ground. You'll see a lot of horses went wire to wire there. And he came pretty close. That he did, I thought was a testament to what good form he's in. He's now had another month since that race, and I'm expecting a big effort from him as well. And I like the 12-1 morning line.
Yeah, that's a good price on him for sure. He I think was a 4-year-old back then because he's 7 now. So let's see, there's something like that. So, but
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't the 3-year-old
yeah,
race.
but yeah, he's any horse, no matter how long ago it was, that has shown an affinity for this course. I think has to be respected. What did you think of Chewing Gum, by the way, in there? I thought he was another one that had a decent chance at an okay price.
If I recall, he's a horse who actually broke his maiden at Kentucky Downs many years ago, and didn't run as well on it last time. He's a horse that I haven't been as impressed with. I'm not sure he's quite the same horse he was. He didn't come back very well at Woodbine. I didn't think he only ran a 109 speed figure. Didn't have a lot of pace, and that was a strong race by Filo D'Ariana, a horse who is just on a tear and never loses unless he comes to the United States. So it was a pretty strong field, but I'm not as high on him as a couple of the others. But he wouldn't shock me, and he does have Joel Rosario, who you probably I talk about it all the time. He's obviously one of the best riders in the country. We talked about riders getting grief. He certainly got some recently for his ride on what's her name? I forget. Warlike
Right.
Goddess. Uh, but if you're gonna bet Joel, I mean, you can bet Joel a lot of times. He's a great rider on every surface at every distance. But turf sprints are his thing, and he actually tore up this meet last year. So leave that horse off at your own peril, I guess.
Yeah, I think he won 5 or 6 one day last year. So Joel certainly rides this course pretty well as one of the top guys, like a Tyler Gaffleone, who seems like he really fits it too.
All right, let's move on to yet another $1 million race, the Grade 2 Kentucky Turf Cup. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit surprised to see Gufo in the entries. It just, I don't know why. He certainly fits in the race. He's going to be a big favorite in here. I just didn't expect to see him show up at Kentucky Downs. He's, I guess, sort of the leader of the division in a division that's pretty wide open this year, but he certainly makes this race interesting. What kind of struck me is from a handicapping perspective, as you mentioned, there haven't been a lot of big closers winning at Kentucky Downs. Now, there haven't been a whole lot of mile-and-a-half races either, but I wonder if that's going to be to his detriment, or do you just think he's better than these horses?
He may be, but I think he's a real bounce candidate. I mean, here's a horse that ran pretty much a lifetime best in the Sword Dancer last time out, and he's back pretty quick, just a couple of weeks, and that's not what he normally does. Most of his races, he's had at least a month or so between them. So I think that's a disadvantage for him. I think his running style could be a disadvantage for him, and I don't think that you need too many reasons, too many disadvantage reasons to find when a horse is 7-5 on the morning line. So I'm going to go away from Gufo in this spot. I like Arklow. His race in the Bowling Green, he had traffic problems in that race. He's won this particular stakes race twice already. He doesn't look like he's really lost a step. He's still running huge numbers. Florent Giroux has been, doing extremely well over this turf course. I think that everything to me points to Arklow in this spot, especially with the price of Gufo. If he really is going to be 7-5 and Arklow is going to be 7-2, to me it's a no brainer to go to Arklow.
I not only like Arklow in this spot, I love Arklow. Not a whole lot to add to what you said. I mean, he loves this course. He's fast as an 8-year old. He's still running the same speed figures he's been running for the last couple years on Timeform US. He ran a 120 last time with, I would say, pretty significant trouble. I think he could have easily won that race with a clean trip, and maybe that would change the odds. And I'm with you on Gufo. That's the other reason it was so surprising. I mean, he just ran. We just don't really see this anymore. I guess it's easier on turf to come back with a quick turnaround than it is on dirt. We see it overseas a lot where horses will come back in a week or 2 weeks and run, but our horses aren't really trained like that. So he's a horse I'm going to take a shot. I'm probably, if I do play a pick five, I'm not even going to use him because if he wins, it's really going to kill the value. And I'm big on Arklow. Are there any others in here that caught your eye as you might throw in like a B or a C horse if you were to play a pick five, or maybe some underneaths in a vertical play?
Maybe Temple could have been one of those. Mike Maker has just had an unbelievable meet here, and this horse is, proven going long. The one thing about Temple is his Kentucky Downs form isn't that great, so that is, a detriment there. He does get Jose Ortiz, which is a plus. I just think, obviously Maker's got a bunch of horses in this race, but to me, it's just I think Arklow is just the way to go, and I'm in total agreement with you. It seems like we're in agreement a little too much so far on this card, but I would not even use Gufo in my pick five too. I would toss him because just I'm not saying he can't win. He's the best horse in the race in my opinion, and he certainly can win. But like you said, if you can't make any money if you have a large ticket and he wins that race. It's going to cut back the price quite a bit, and so I think that's where you go ahead. I would probably single Arklow in this race if it was up to me.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Gufo is no stranger to losing at short prices. He's done plenty of that. Got a great trip last time, got the job done. But I think there's reason to be skeptical. One other horse I wanted to mention that I am going to throw in, particularly in verticals in the 2 and 3 slots. I don't really play supers, but I do play exactas and tries. Is I think Admission Office has some pretty dirtied up form. I think his race at Churchill last time is a complete throwout. That course was not a turf course. It certainly is nothing like the turf course at Kentucky Downs. I've always thought he is a mile and a half type horse. He runs well at all distances, but he's never really run it. He hasn't run at Kentucky Downs, but I just get the feeling he's a horse who's going to like that kind of track. So if he's anywhere around that 10-1 morning line, I'm going to be using him as well.
And you get Johnny V, which is always a good thing too with Admission Office. So yeah, I mean that's a reasonable one to throw in there.
Yeah, I always shake my head when I see John Velasquez and watch him ride and realize I don't know exactly how old he is, but whatever it is, he's in our ballpark. And as a 55-year-old guy, I wonder, man, I don't know how he does it. I'll go play tennis for a couple hours, and the rest of the night I'm limping around the house, and my feet hurt, my back hurts, and This guy's out there riding horses at 40 miles an hour. Looks like he could go run a marathon after the card, and just an amazing. And on top of that, just a great rider who can ride any kind of horse, any surface. And really, I don't think he gets enough credit, even though he's a Hall of Famer, but he's still underrated somehow.
Yeah, he's a legend for sure. I just looked it up while you were mentioning it. He was born November 24th, 1971, so he's 50 years old. Uh, Mike Smith calls him the kid, I'm sure, because he's even quite a bit older than that.
Wow. Yeah, amazing. So let's move on to the Grade 3 Ladies Sprint. This is the other race I was talking about. It's a $600,000 purse. I assume that's staying the same. I don't think there's any grade one winners or anything like that in here, but we do have a horse I think most would consider a grade one type horse, and that's Campanelli. I'll ask you as the racetrack announcer and somebody that I know prides himself in pronouncing the names of horses correctly. Is that the correct way to say it?
I have to go back and see. To be honest with you, I think it's Campanelle, but I have to make sure on that one, and I will be sure to do my homework before post time
Gotcha. 'Cause
for that
I
race,
did watch a couple
just to make
replays
sure.
and I thought they said Campanelli, but that doesn't mean that's correct.
You know what? Well, a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll go back and luckily this horse has been running at Keeneland, and Kurt Becker is one of my go-to guys. Like if Kurt Becker calls it a certain way, I know he did the homework and make sure he calls it by the right name. So that's a big edge for me. I only have to watch that replay and I'll be good. So Kurt is definitely a good source. So whatever he said, I'm going to go with. And I mean, she is the one to beat, no doubt about it. That race she ran at Ascot, in that massive field in the Platinum Jubilee, and she did get disqualified in that race uh, for some interference there after the start, I believe it was. But you know what, I'm going to look in, especially with these turf sprints where I think anything can happen. I was going to look elsewhere and try to come up with somebody else. First of all, I think there's going to be a hot pace with Creative Credit setting it. I mean that filly coming in from Belterra, she's been running, in all these stakes races throughout the Midwest, and she's fast as can be. But those were like 5 furlong and 5.5, and I don't think she's going to be able to get the distance. But I do think she's going to be a major player as far as the pace of the race goes. And I think one that is going to benefit from that, and it's again that cutback angle. It's Jouster, the 3 for Todd Pletcher coming into town. With Joelle riding, I think that's a big edge. I think 6.5 is going to hit her right over the head here. The question mark is, will she handle Kentucky Downs? But I think she's won on good rated turf courses a couple of times. I think she's got a couple of good things going for her, and I think she's going to get the trip in here. And she's 5-1 on the morning line. I think that she's definitely one that I'd be looking for if I'm going to try to beat Campanelle. I think I'd be going for Jouster as the upsetter.
I have no problem with that pick. This is the other race that I did a preview for with David, so I won't spend too much time. I actually went with the favorite. This is the one I did the formulator stat for at the time, and I just think she's better than these when it comes to speed figures. And I do agree with you about a hot pace. As you know, we do a pace projector at Timeform US. We show that same thing, a red flag saying it's going to be a fast pace, largely because of Creative Credit and also LZ, who's another quick filly who, surprisingly enough, has been in the same race as Creative Credit the last 2 times and just can't keep up with her. But I would imagine they're going to try again because I don't know what other style she has. She does seem to be more of a fairground specialist. That's where LZ wins her races. I don't think she's a contender here, but I do think those two are going to contribute to what should be a pretty quick pace. That said, it's not like Campanelle needs the lead. I mean, she's her race at Keeneland. She was a few lengths off of it. And I just think she's better. If I were going to use some others, maybe as backups, Jouster would certainly be among them. I also like at a price a bit Toby's Heart. She's a horse who I think has had some difficult trip. She won a race her lone try at Kentucky Downs in the past, so she's one I would use as a backup on pick five tickets and also in vertical plays in the underneath slots.
Yeah, I think I'm with you as Campanelle being the one to beat in here. I'm just I've been trying to beat the favorites in some of these races, and you'll see why as we get to the last race we're going to talk about, because I think the favorite in there is going to win for fun.
Yeah, that said, let's move on to that race, the Grade Two Franklin Simpson Stakes for $600,000, and I would have a hard time arguing with you. We're obviously talking about Big Invasion, a horse who did not win his debut at 5 furlongs. He ran second that day, coming on after a tough start, and has merely throttled every horse he's ever faced ever since then. He's never won by less than a couple lengths, and just seems to do it with disdain. I mean, it never, when you watch his races, even as a closer, it's kind of hard to say. But if you focus on Big Invasion, to my eye, he never looks like a loser. He always looks like he's just sitting. He's a push button kind of horse and ready to go. He gets Joel Rosario, Christophe Clement trains, who's one of the best turf sprint trainers out there. So um, I'm assuming you saw the same things, but
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
else,
I
Larry? Yeah, what would you like to add
Well,
about it?
just the only thing I'll say is that there are some other horses in here that look on paper like they're really nice horses, like Sumter, the West Coast horse for Richard Mandela, who's kind of a win machine, and Stitched, who's been winning races lately too. But I mean, numbers wise, there's just no contest. Big Invasion, just I don't know how he looks on your numbers, but I mean, looking at Thoroughgraph, he's a huge standout over these horses, and same with Byers. So I just think that the one good thing I see in this form that I like is that he won that race at Belmont at 7 furlongs to Paradise Creek. Otherwise, everything is 5.5 and 5. So I'd be a little worried about the distance, because he other than that one race, hasn't shown the ability to go. But this 6.5, but getting that 7 to me was the key to just forget about it. I just don't think the distance will be a factor. I think he just a complete standout in this race, and I just would completely single him without any question.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I actually think the seven's probably perfect for him, and I'm considering this about seven. I think the 5.5 might even be too short. He's just good enough to overcome it. And as far as my figures go, same thing. I mean, he's been running, I think his last was 117, the last two. Nobody else has run that quick. And coincidentally enough, the horse with the next best figures on my numbers is Run Curtis Run, who's a horse he's been beating. So it was hard for me to come up with anybody else in here. If you're going to play verticals, any other horses you would use underneath that are going to be a price? I know you mentioned a couple, Sumter and Stitched. I'm not sure if they're really going to offer value underneath of Big Invasion. Maybe Stitched a little bit more than Sumter.
No, I kind of mentioned them just as an example of horses that are winning races right now, but are kind of slow on the speed figure scale. So, I just, if I'm playing exotics, I don't know, what I do in this race, because there's really nobody else I kind of like. To me, it's just a one horse race, and I didn't really see anybody that stood out to me as an exacta play.
I'm with you. This is the kind of race I probably won't even play unless I'm playing a pick five. I did have to bring up one other horse though, because I didn't know he was going to be in this race at the time, but I made a tweet about him, and some people gave me some grief. Most people got it for the joke that it was, but Call Me Midnight's in here, and he's actually a horse I grew to like because I bet him in his big win in the Lecomte. That was a horse both David and I liked when we did the podcast. But looking back in retrospect, I have to ask you, what was the bigger upset? Rich Strike winning the Derby or this horse beating Epicenter somehow?
Yeah, yeah. I think if you look back and see what Epicenter's done since, I'd say it's a pretty giant upset that day, him being beating Epicenter. But I think it's really hard to. I'll still go for Rich Strike as the
Yeah.
answer to that question, because I just, he was 80 to 1, and if you asked me to handicapping the race without looking at the result, I would have had him at like 800 to 1. He just, to me, there's just nothing that coming into that Derby that would make me think that he had any shot. But he's really shown he can run. He had a nice race in the Travers, and now he's going to run in that Lucas Classic at Churchill, a track that he absolutely loves, obviously. And so I think Rich Strike has shown that he actually is the real deal after that Travers race, and I'm just glad I saw him in the Derby, because it was one of those situations where all of a sudden, you see Zandon and Epicenter coming down to the wire. It's like, okay, these are the two we expected, and it looks like this is where it's going to be. And all of a sudden, you see this white and red flash coming on the inside of them, and thank goodness Rich Strike was the only horse in the Derby with red and white silks. It couldn't have been anybody else. So. Yeah, as much as your mind is saying that can't possibly be Rich Strike, it was. So that was an unusual Derby to call, that's for sure. By the way, Craig, before I forget, not to change the subject, but before I forget, I own part of a horse that's running at Monmouth. You and I have talked about him a few times. One time, Willard is in the second race at Monmouth on Saturday as well. So we're going to be rooting for him. He's 7-5 on the morning line, so hopefully he'll finally get his second win. We've been trying to put him in the right spots, except for the Haskell, of course, where he had absolutely no chance whatsoever. But hopefully he'll run a big race for us on Saturday at Monmouth.
Yeah, he ran really well his first try in the turf, I thought, when he was in that race with Dakota Gold. He's a horse who has lost at some short prices a few times. So, I'll be wishing you luck, but I might be betting against you. I don't know. I haven't really handicapped that race, to be honest.
He has been known to lose at 1-5.
Before we go, just wanted to mention one thing about Rich Strike, since you were talking about your call. One thing as a handicapper, Rich Strike reminded me of was don't ignore the also eligibles. And I'm not in any way trying to say I would have picked Rich Strike, but I know when we did our previews, I did an article for that race. He actually had the top late pace figure on TimeformUS. I do an article where I write about the late pace figures, and I left them out. So that's one thing I will never do again, is ignore the AEs.
Ooh.
The AEs,
Yeah, that's a bad one.
yeah, not, and like I said, I would not have bet the horse, but I would have said he was the best closer in the field. That said,
Right.
I would never came up with them. So, but it's just one of those. There were some AEs in some of these races at Kentucky Downs. I did look at them. I didn't ignore them. Just didn't really find any of them all that interesting. Usually in races like big stakes like this, the AEs are AEs for a reason. So I've kept you long enough, Larry. We don't need to do a big recap or anything like that. People can figure out if they want to play a pick five. I think we hinted at who we liked and who we didn't like, and maybe some long shot plays. So I just want to express how glad I am that I had you on, and that you were willing to do it. I know you're a busy guy these days, and I really appreciate our friendship. Even we've been many thousands of miles apart at times, but we always make time to see each other when we can. And I know the Breeders' Cup will be busy, but I'll be there, so I will at least make sure I say hi and come see you.
Brothers for life, my friend. No doubt about that. Being Mount St. Joe grads, and I do look forward to seeing you every time we get to run into each other, even though it's not that often. Especially when Kenny Beck is involved, because if anybody's had the opportunity to meet him, it is an unforgettable opportunity, and your ears will be ringing by the time you're done listening to him too, because he's got a lot to say. If you did a podcast with him, it'd be like 8 hours long. So it's a good thing you didn't.
Oh, minimum 8 hours. And he's a guy who actually he listens to my podcast, but he much more prefers Chuck Simon's podcast, Going in Circles. And I have got to get those two guys together, because I don't think either one of them would stop talking and they'd never hear each other say a word, but it would just be epic.
Well, I know Kenny wouldn't stop talking, because I've never known him to.
All right. Well, thanks again, Larry, for having us. And thanks for listening, everybody. You can find this podcast on all the usual places: Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube is we post it on YouTube, all the other places. Same as always, the rundown David gives. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.